Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the Happy Knitting Podcast. My name is Julia, I'm coming to you from the UK, and today is Saturday, April 15th, 2023. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you haven't been here before, I've realized that I haven't reintroduced myself for a very long time. So I thought I would just use like 2-3 minutes at the beginning today to reintroduce myself really quickly, catch you guys up, and then we'll dive straight into finished objects, works in progress, and so on. So yeah, like I said, my name is Julia. As you can probably tell from my accent, I am German. We moved to the UK from Germany about 2.5 years ago. Yeah, it's right after my son was born. So again, I have a 2.5-year-old son who keeps me very busy. He is quite intense. Obviously, he is the most beautiful boy as well, but he is also quite intense. So yeah, whenever I'm not knitting, I'm usually racing after him. Anyways, I've been knitting for a long time. I always forget, it must be over 10 years now. I've been with my husband for 9, and I was definitely knitting when I met him. So there you go. Originally I learned as a child from my grandma, as I think lots of people in Germany and Europe do, and then eventually picked it back up again because I decided on holiday in Thailand that I was going to learn how to knit socks. And so I did, and then eventually I ventured into other garments and accessories, and basically today I knit everything. I still love socks. I still really enjoy knitting socks, as you will be able to tell. I also like spinning, but I never have the time for it. So I do really enjoy spinning yarn, but there's just so much time I have for crafting at the moment, and I want to use that time knitting rather than spinning most of the time. I very briefly dabbled into sewing, but I don't enjoy sewing at all. I like the idea of sewing, but the actual doing it's like a very precise thing, and you spend most of the time, it seems to me, like cutting and planning and setting things up. Whereas with knitting, I just enjoy the act of knitting, and obviously I've been knitting for a long time now, so I find it quite easy to modify and change things to my liking, so it's much more natural to me. Yeah, so that's a brief roundup, I hope, just to give you a tiny bit of background. I still have that cold, so I'm sorry if my voice continues to get worse throughout this recording, but we are just doing the best we can. So let's jump in with some finished objects. I have 2 pairs of socks that I've finished. First up, these are still inside out because the ends are woven in. I just never have scissors handy to clip the ends. Because again, toddler, you can't have scissors around. He did before Christmas actually briefly grab some kitchen scissors and cut up one of my gift knits that I'd made for my mother-in-law, and like he cut it up so quickly, like there was no saving it. So that's why I'm now very careful with scissors. Anyways, I finished my opal pair of socks. These are opal garn. What is it? I think the line was Sweet Kisses, and this colorway was Kerzenschein, I believe. But if you, in the Sweet Kisses line, there's only one that has these like purple and green shades. It's a very funky sock yarn. When I first started knitting it, obviously all of the opal yarns are a bit funky when it comes to the patterning, but this one I think is especially funky. But I do quite like it. Anyways, they're finished. And I also finished my ribbed socks again. Are they both inside out? No, one of them is inside out. Same thing, the ends are woven in, I just need to cut them off. These I knit out of the Isaiah sock yarn, which is a blend of, I think, wool, alpaca, and recycled nylon. And this is really lovely. I really enjoyed this yarn actually. It was a bit different to work with. And I also did 4 stitches less because I think it's about 350 meters per 100 grams. So it's just slightly thicker. And yes, I went through the trouble of knitting the entire pair of socks in 2x2 rib. But it just makes for such a lovely fabric, even though it does take a bit longer, even for me. And I like knitting rib. This was a bit of a slog, but it's going to be so worth it. I really like these, and obviously you can fold down the cuff as well, which I think can be quite nice with boots or like ankle boots. So yeah, these are finished as well. All of my socks I usually knit on 2.25mm needles. Usually I do 64 stitches. For these ones I did 60. Next up, I have a finished object that, unless you follow me on Instagram, you haven't seen this. This is, I'm so proud of this. This is a stash project, so I'm trying to knit more from stash. Failing slightly at the moment because I have been buying a tiny bit of yarn. But there's an explanation for it, not that it needs one, but there is. But yeah, this year started out being entirely about like working from stash. And so what I did is I gathered all of my mini skeins and leftovers and like just little bits and bobs of sock yarn and 4-ply yarn that I had in stash. And I decided to just knit through it because I've never like massively bought mini skein sets, but I have accumulated a few over the years. And yeah, they just wanted to be used. Like, they look pretty in a box or in like a little, had them in like a little glass jar, but I just wanted to use them up and use up some stash. So I sort of gathered them in rainbow order and then spent many hours winding them into like 4 massive balls of yarn. I'm not even sure. I don't think, oh no, I didn't actually magic knot them because I knew I was just going to weave in the ends and join as I go in the blanket. But anyway, so I used 820 grams of mini skeins, and then I paired that with this yarn. This is a cone of woolly knit in the Morning Frost colorway. I used to have 2 of these cones. So I used to have 1 kilo of this yarn, which I got in a D-stash for something ridiculous, like I think £8 per cone. So this was very, very affordable British wool, and I really love this yarn, by the way. I'm not sponsored, I just really enjoy a good, affordable British wool, non-superwash woolly wool. And I originally used some of the first cone to knit my shifty sweater. So if you remember, I knit a shifty by Andrea Mowry with this as the base color, and then I used different sort of, yeah, again, basically odds and ends for my stash as the contrast colors. But obviously I still had loads left, and I've knit another massive blanket, but I still have some left. I could probably still knit another sweater out of this, so this is just like the never-ending cone of grey yarn. But it's really pretty. I'm not sure if you can tell. It's not just grey. It's basically 2 strands marled together, and one of them is lighter than the other. So it is a really pretty color. Anyway, so I held everything double and I made this ginormous blanket. And this is the biggest blanket by far that I've ever made. I haven't blocked it. If I were to wash and block it, I'm sure it would grow because it's garter stitch, so it would get even bigger. I haven't measured it, but it is massive, especially because this is basically the shorter side. It is so wide as well. So it just keeps going and going and going, and as you can tell, it just kind of cycles through all the colors of minis I had in stash. There's a lot of purples and pinks because I love purple and pinks. I also really love this sort of like yellow grello section. Yeah, I don't really knit with green yarn, so there's not much green, but I love this so much. I have a project page which will tell you how many stitches I cast on. I don't remember. It was something, maybe 250, 280. It was a lot of stitches. I remember I cast on in January this year. And it was just too wide, so I ripped it out once when I'd maybe knit like 10 centimeters and then cast on a few stitches less, and it's perfect. I love it so much. And again, I knit this in 3 months, which may seem crazy, but honestly, we had so much going on in the first couple of months in this year. So whereas I usually I want something a bit more entertaining than just garter stitch, in that phase of our lives, I just needed that. Like, I did so much comfort knitting into this as my son was settling into nursery, which has been really hard actually. And then eventually we bought a house which had like everything that happens with buying a house is super stressful. And then we like planning a move and organizing everything, like everything that goes with suddenly owning property in a country that you don't really know and you don't know how it works. I just knitted all the stress into this, and now it's done and I couldn't love it anymore. So as you can tell, I literally just did girdle stitch back and forth. I did a selvage stitch edge, so I slipped the last stitch purlwise. I tend to just knit my ends in as I go, so in the end I just had to cut the little like tiny ends off. I didn't have to do any like massive weaving in of the ends. And I feel like this pairing of a non-superwash woolly wool, which is great for warmth and like fuzziness, combining this with one strand of mostly superwash sock yarn actually made a really nice fabric, because this is really like a lovely and warm and has all the characteristics of a like non-superwash blanket, but obviously you get the fun rainbow colors that you tend to get more in superwash yarns and the added bonus of using stash. So I think it worked out really well. I'm not too worried about having to hand wash blankets. Like, this is not going to go in the machine. If anything, I will hand wash it and then spin it in the machine just to get some of the moisture out, because this will take years to dry essentially. But yeah, the only blanket that I've made out of superwash yarn, I think, is my son's blanket that goes in his cot, because I imagine one day with potty training and all of these things, it will need to be washed quite regularly. So yeah, this is done and I love it. I love it so much. Lastly, you may remember that last episode, I was talking about my second Lento sweater that I was knitting out of a cone of mystery yarn and silk mohair. I couldn't even find it to show you, but let me tell you, that was a fail. That did not work out, because I already mentioned last week as I was recording that essentially the yarn was twisting, or the sweater was twisting in a little bit, because it was a singles yarn, which I believe was a weaving yarn. I don't think it was really meant for hand knitting. And if you're a spinner, you'll know that if you have like significantly too much twist in your yarn, what happens is then your stitches start to get a little bit twisted. So I finished the sweater, I blocked it. It looked okay. It didn't look great. I never loved it as much as I did with my first Lento. But I washed it, I blocked it, and it was just really skewed. And I tried to block it out, and it is wearable, but I know it twists. Like, it just looks weird because the stitches are going this way rather than this way. And yeah, I was quite annoyed by it. I mean, luckily the Lento is a very quick pattern. If you don't know, it's a top-down cropped raglan sweater by Jonna Hietala, on a very loose gauge, so it went really quickly. But yeah, combined with the fact that I didn't really love the yarn to begin with, I don't know, I might just give it to a charity or something. Like, it's wearable, it's going to keep someone warm. I think I also made mine too cropped, and yeah, very sad. So that is technically an FO. I did finish it. I thought about actually ripping everything out and reclaiming the yarn, but I've decided not to. And the thing is, and if you have some wisdom, do let me know. I have quite a few cones like this, but out of similar yarn that is single ply, very thin. What is it? It's not Shetland wool, lamb's wool, I think. And they're all single ply, and they all have the problem that they're slightly over twisted. Well, I mean, they're singles yarn that obviously hasn't been fulled. So they're not like the merino singles you'll buy from hand dyers that are relatively balanced. They're just not balanced yarns. And I've thought and I've experimented on my wheel about plying two strands together, because they're very thin anyway. So I used two strands held together for my Lento as well. But it's not really working out, because obviously I can't put in too much twist, otherwise it'll have the same problem again essentially. And yeah, I don't know if there's an easy way to fix it. And again, I bought this yarn very, very cheaply off like Facebook Marketplace. I'm not ready to invest a massive amount of time, because I just don't have the massive amount of time to invest, and I'd rather spend that time knitting than fixing something that maybe wasn't meant to be knit with to start with. So if you guys have wisdom, if you've experienced this before, or maybe if you are weavers, because again, I think this is weaving yarn, do let me know. Also, if you're in the UK and you want a ton of cones of that yarn, let me know. Maybe I can just pass it on or sell it on to someone. But yeah, that is the sad story of my Lento number 2. But that does get us right into works in progress, because of course I cast on another Lento. So I'm sorry, this is going to continue being a Lento podcast, really. Like I said, patterned by Jonna Hietala. It's a top-down raglan, and this is my Lento number 3. I think I teased about this on the last podcast, about the fact that I really wanted to use one and make one using brushed Suri alpaca. So that's exactly what I did. I am holding 2 yarns together as usual. This is Suri alpaca from a commercial brand that was quite affordable. And this is actually pure wool from Pickles, which is a Norwegian yarn store in Oslo. And they have their own yarn lines, which I think you can only get in Norway. I'm not sure how they work with international shipping. But I picked this up in Oslo in either 2018 or 2019, so it's quite old stash. I originally picked this up with matching mohair to make myself an Elton cardigan by Joey Locatelli. Never did. I eventually used the pink mohair for my wedding shawl, actually. And then after a wedding, I bought more pink mohair so I could once again make myself the Elton cardigan, but it just never happened. And because the Elton doesn't use very much yarn, I only had 200 grams of this, but then as it turns out, this is perfect for the Lento because you don't need very much yarn. So finally, I'm using this yarn with the beige or cream or whatever Suri alpaca, and I'm making myself another Lento sweater, and this one I love. This one I'm definitely happy with. In terms of modifications, again, I didn't do the folded neckband. And I decided to do this one with eyelets as the increases. So for my first Lento, I knitted to pattern, but it was a bit complicated. There's also a slight error in the pattern, and just with the short rows, it didn't really flow for me. I think that used a knit front back increase. With my second one, I basically increased using yarn overs, but I twisted the stitches. And for this one, I just didn't twist the stitches, so it has this like line of sort of lacy eyelets where the raglan is, which I think is quite decorative. And yes, I have finished the body. This one I very much eyeballed, but I think the length should be quite good. It's also quite oversized, and this is where I am on the first sleeve, so I don't really have that much further to go. I need to decide if I'm once again doing long sleeve, like long sleeves, or I'm gonna do 3/4 length sleeves. I haven't really decided yet. But yeah, Lento number 3 using Pickles pure wool and Suri alpaca, and I really love it. I would say with the Suri, the fabric it creates is a bit denser than if you use mohair silk. So this feels a bit heavier and a bit more like a proper sweater rather than like the really thin sweatshirt like fabric that my other Lentos were, but I really like it, and I highly doubt this will be my last one. I think I'm just gonna keep knitting these because they are very, very fun to knit. So I have cast on another sweater, and this is a long story about the yarn. This yarn that I'm using here is Blacker yarn. I think it's my first time using Blacker yarns. This is Blacker Swan Falkland Island wool. It's their 4-ply. I think they also have a DK weight, even though this one I would... I mean, it's 175 meters per 50 grams, which to me, 4-ply sort of rings as fingering in the UK. This is definitely more like a... I'm knitting it as a DK weight. I reckon it should be classed as a sport weight. Anyhow, this is a yarn. I saw this yarn many, many, many years ago in Ravelry wool, which is a yarn store in Munich, which stocks very sort of organic woolly yarns. It's really beautiful. I saw this yarn there, fell in love with it then, but didn't really want to splurge, I guess, on what was a little bit pricey yarn back then. I didn't really have the project for it, so I'd never bought it. And then a few years later, as I was basically literally about to give birth to my son, we knew we were going to move to the UK within weeks, and I decided to basically buy myself yarn one more time before I would have a baby, because I thought then I'll never have time to knit anyways. Didn't really make sense, but I thought I would buy this yarn, and it somehow has become a bit, a bit nostalgic for me. This is colorway Mountain Berry. So I bought myself a couple of balls of this color. I really originally wanted, and I still want, they have like a beautiful sort of creamy oatmeal color, but it was really hard to get then. I'm not sure. I think this yarn maybe discontinued. I'm not even sure. It's not an easy color to get, so I got this one, and I'm finally using it, and I'm so happy I'm using it, and I'm so happy I bought the yarn back then, because turns out I am finding time to knit again, and I've decided to knit this yarn into, yet another anchor sweater. This is a pattern by Petite Knit. This is my 4th rendition of this pattern, and this is what tends to happen with me lately. I just keep knitting the same patterns all over again. I think it's just for me. If I find a pattern that I really like and that it works with my wardrobe, I just enjoy making multiple versions. I mean, obviously that way a pattern gets much more use and makes sense financially, but it's just, if I know something that works, I will just keep making it over and over and over again. And I think part of that is also just the stage of my life that I'm in right now. Like every now and then I will enjoy making something really complicated, and I will enjoy like a complicated construction. But most of the time, like at the moment, my life is so busy, and like by the time I get time to knit, which often is only in the evenings now that my son doesn't nap anymore, fun times, I just want to knit. I don't want to risk like funky constructions that may not work, or designs that don't have that many projects, or you don't really know how well the pattern is written. I just want to go. So yeah, this is my 4th Anchors sweater by Petite Knit. I am always using her DK weight rendition. She has like many renditions of the same pattern, which you can have different opinions about. But I think this is her like a 21 or 20 stitch gauge, and every time I make it, I just sort of adjust my size depending on the gauge that I have, and I will modify it anyways, so it works for me. This pattern doesn't have short rows, which I think is just a shame. So as with all my other anchor sweaters, I've added short rows, and I add them in the back under the ribbed yoke, because I think it would be quite tricky to seamlessly put them in the back of the sweater. You could, but yeah, I just put them in the bottom. Actually, I'm showing it to you the wrong way around. Because I do want the back higher than the front, otherwise the fit is just really strange. And if I don't have short rows, what will happen is that my back will just sort of ride up a lot. So anyways, I added short rows. I think they should be in the pattern, but they're not, unfortunately. And otherwise, yeah, I've just zoomed through the yoke, and I'm now, halfway maybe down the body of the sweater, and then I'm going to do some sleeves, and it's very sort of plain sailing knitting, and I love it. And this yarn is beautiful. I can't describe it. It's a very sort of woolly yarn, but it is so soft and so squishy, and yeah, very, very excited about this one. Because my first anchor sweater I knit was in JC Rennie yarn, and I love it. My second one I knit out of, I think, Ulcentrum yarn, which is a Swedish yarn, and unpopular opinion, I don't like it. I don't like the way it feels on my skin. I don't like it at all. So I haven't really worn it. And then my third version, I basically made it into a cotton t-shirt. So yeah, this one's gonna be like a more traditional sweater again, and I'm really, really excited. Last but not least, I am still plugging away on my half and half wrap number 4. Oh no, and I've dropped a million stitches. Yeah, so I'm sorry if this is boring. I just keep knitting the same things, but I think if you experiment with colors and fit and fibers, it can still be really interesting to make things more than once, definitely for me. And like, I just like some shapes. Like, I have 3 half and half wraps already, which is a pattern by Pearl Soho. It's a free pattern, and I wear them all the time. I wore them all throughout winter, and I obviously, they're quite a statement piece, depending on the colors, obviously, but still, like, they're quite a massive shawls. So I like having a few different color options, and it's a very meditative knit again. And this one I actually also, I think I started it before Christmas, but in a similar vein to this blanket. I just needed simple knitting because there was a lot of stuff going on. And this is my first half and half wrap that I'm knitting out of linen quill yarn. So I got 2 skeins of this beautiful turmeric yellow and 2 skeins of this mushroom, pale mushroom, I think. No, something mushroom colorway. I think it's pale mushroom. I cast on less stitches than the large size, which should have been enough for 2 skeins, but it wasn't. So I definitely lost yarn chickens, so I have added this massive bright magenta pink square. This is Knit Picks yarn, this is Knit Picks palette. And now I am just on the endless rows of beige until I finally finish the shawl. And this is taking a while, honestly. I'm really trying to work on it. I'm going to attempt to focus today's knitting time on this again, because I just want this to be finished. I think it'll actually be a really cool sort of couch blanket as well. Like, I love the graphic element with the square. I think it looks really good. But yeah, I just need to make some progress on it, and believe me, I actually am knitting on it a lot. It just takes ages now because basically the rows are just getting longer and longer and longer, and like all of this I still have to attach. So I really hope next time I podcast this will be done, but who knows? Who really knows? And yeah, that's it. That's all of my knitting for the past 2 weeks, I think. Otherwise, it's just been busy. Yeah, we did have Easter. I forget about holidays very, very quickly. Yeah, so we had the Easter weekend, which was very chill, actually. It was really nice. And then my mum came over from Germany right after Easter and has been here for a couple of days. So obviously that was very busy, and we were out doing loads, and I'm honestly still sore because we did so much walking. We spent a day in London. We also just did a lot of walking around here, and it was really, really fun. And I actually knit half the body and half the sleeve of my lento, I think, just in one night, because obviously then my son was busy playing with my mum, and I could just sit and chat and actually knit rather than sit on the floor with the toys. So I got some knitting done, which was lovely. And yeah, otherwise now we're just ready for spring. Like, where is it? We've just had the worst weather here in the UK basically all of 2023 so far. It's still freezing. I'm still wearing my winter coat. I'm still wearing my not a Sophie scarf out of alpaca wool, which is ridiculous. This time last year we were like running around in t-shirts, but it's just been so cold and so rainy and so windy. But now we're finally getting some better weather, and we've just done a lot of work in our garden, because if you don't know, we moved into our own house 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, something like that. We finally now have garden furniture, so I'm looking forward to hopefully doing some outdoor knitting sometime soon. And yeah, that's basically what's been going on behind the scenes of everything. So yeah, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm so discombobulated today, but I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It was definitely a chatty one, but I'm really, really, really trying to just stick to podcasting, because I know if I keep it too long, I'm just going to disappear again, and I've done that a few times now. And I really want to just keep doing this, and I think I keep doing it by trying to not be perfectionist about it, trying to not just wait until I have the perfect setting and lighting and content and whatever. I'm just gonna try to keep throwing these videos online, and obviously you guys seem to like it, so thank you so much if you do watch and if you did stick around until now. I will see you probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And until then, thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, enjoy your knitting, have a lovely weekend, and I will see you very, very soon. Happy knitting. Bye!